Welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I feature Olympians, CEOs, disruptors, authors, professional athletes, and the best of the best, where they share their stories of resilience with my lens on leadership and culture. Let's get started. Greetings and welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I am so excited to bring our guest to you today. Michelle Mace Curran has led an impressive career as a fighter pilot during her 13 years in the U.S. Air Force. From 2019 to 2021, she flew as the only female pilot for the Air Force Thunderbirds and performed for millions across the country and internationally. Before joining the Thunderbirds, Michelle was a combat-proven fighter pilot, completing missions across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. As the lead solo for the Thunderbirds, Michelle realized the flying was cool, but the best part was inspiring others to overcome their fears and pursue their dreams. Since transitioning out of the military, she has founded her company Upside Down Dreams and is committed to empowering men and women of all ages to overcome obstacles and face their self-doubt head-on. She is an author of 2 children's books and has been featured on several well-known media platforms, including ours, including the Kelly Clarkson Show, CBS Evening News, and Glamour Magazine. Welcome to the show, May.
I'm gonna hire you to introduce me for speaking events. That was amazing. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's all you, girl. So it is such a treat to have you on the show. So I start every show the same. I always ask the first question, tell us your story.
I'm gonna try to give you the summarized version. Sometimes I go down rabbit trails. I'll give you the overview, and then I'm sure we'll get into it more. But I was born and raised in a small town in northern Wisconsin, about 4,000 people. Very much a working class family, not a military family and not an aviation family. So I just didn't know about any of that stuff. Super shy, awkward, introverted kid for sure. But I was very adventurous. I was very driven and I had a lot of big goals and big dreams. And eventually I needed a way to pay for college, and ROTC, specifically Air Force ROTC, became a way to do that. So I applied for a scholarship, ended up getting a full ride, which was amazing. Amazing news for me and for my parents.
Yeah.
But at that point, I wanted to be an FBI agent. So I went off to college in St. Paul, Minnesota at the University of St. Thomas as a criminal justice major.
Okay.
In Air Force ROTC, with the plan of doing 4 years in the Air Force to pay back my time as likely special investigations, because that made sense with criminal justice. Then I was going to get out and apply to the FBI Academy. That was the grand plan of like a 16, 17-year-old. Clearly that did not happen. And, I took a big pivot halfway through college. I got to see 2 fighter jets take off up close, kind of for the first time, like right there. Jet noise vibrates your whole body. I got goosebumps. I was just like, holy crap.
I want to do that.
Yeah. Forget the FBI.
Yeah.
Like, sign me up for that. And it still amazes me because having that moment and then listening to it and actually being like, okay, I'm going to have the courage to throw my name in the hat to compete, to actually go into this career field is one thing, but then actually making it happen is a whole other thing. And I think it's a combination of right time, right place, a little bit of luck, and just a ton of hard work.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to pilot training, getting my first choice of aircraft, which was the F-16, because based on that inspirational moment, I didn't want to be just an Air Force pilot. I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
Odds are not in your favor. It's like 2, maybe 3 max available for each class of about 25 students. So I knew I had to do well. It's probably one of the things that kept me working my butt off for all of pilot training. And then off to fly F-16s from there. So I feel like that was a lot right out the gate.
Yeah, no. So let's unpack some of that, because first of all, I don't think many 16-year-olds have a plan. So bravo for having a plan, and bravo for making a pivot. There's nothing wrong with a pivot. So how, like, you feel the vibration, you see the planes take off, you say, that's my dream. This is what I'm going after. But were there any female role models? Was there anyone you could look up to that looked like you that was doing it? And how did they feel about you coming in?
At that moment when I decided it was something I wanted to pursue, there were women flying at that point in fighter cockpits. Fighter cockpits opened to women in 1993. And this was around like 2007, 2008 timeframe. But I had no way to connect with them. It wasn't like it is now where I could follow them on Instagram.
Right.
Right. And like see this amazing woman doing this really cool thing. So I remember when I got to pilot training, there was one female instructor in my squadron. She wasn't a fighter pilot, but I still immediately was just like, this, we're best friends now. Like, please help me. Like,
Yeah.
how are you navigating this? And she felt the same way because she didn't have many female students either. So we hit it off right away. We're still friends to today. And then as I got further into the program, when I got into the fighter training pipeline, there was one female instructor who had been an F-15 pilot. So she had actually been a fighter pilot in the operational Air Force and now is back instructing. And I was intimidated by her. And I remember just, I was like observing, but being kind of afraid of her.
Yeah.
Not because she was like abrasive or mean or anything. That was just like all on my side, just being like, this is intimidating. This is, what I want to do one day. I don't have the courage to go ask questions and stuff yet at that point. And then as I got into that world, there were every base I went to, there was always some woman that was playing a role as a role model in my life, whether that was in Japan, my first operational squadron, where there were four of us, four female pilots on the entire base, flying F-16s.
Out of how many people? How many people are on a base?
So, well, as far as fighter pilots, there were two squadrons. Each one had about 50 pilots. So say there's 100.
4 out of 100, not big numbers.
Right. And that was actually beating the odds because at that point, only about 2% of fighter pilots were women.
Yeah.
So we were twice the average that we had four of us. And two of them were more experienced. So it was myself and one other woman that were first assignment, like we're brand new. And the other two had done assignments in other locations. So they had more time in that world, more hours and experience in the aircraft. And so I definitely really looked up to them. But there were a lot of gaps at different points in my career where there just was no one there to look up to.
Yeah.
And I think that's changing for the better now.
Well, I love that you say that. I mean, I grew up in the tech world and I was the only woman on many, many teams. And I imagine this was the same for you, but I had to speak male. I had to understand how to move through their world. And I didn't have many examples of this is the only way to lead. This is the only way to sell. And it's really a bummer that didn't exist. It's certainly changed, and I'm thrilled that it has. But that representation is not a small thing. So I can totally relate to you seeing that first, F-15 pilot and being like, oh my God, it's like a unicorn. This is exciting.
And I think one of the things that changed from my perspective as when I was young and very much trying to prove myself in this world, and like in this male-dominated culture that I'd stepped into, I did everything I could to be one of the bros, right? Yeah. To like fit in, go with the flow, not make waves. So I very much was what I call like playing dress up, right? Like I would put on my fighter pilot uniform, go to work, and I'm like, okay, like make the jokes that everyone else makes. Use the same slang. Okay. If you're uncomfortable with something, just pretend you're not and laugh and go along with it. I realized that was to my detriment later on. And during that phase of my career, when I was just, I'm in my early to mid 20s, the maturity is not there yet. The perspective is not there yet. I also saw other women a lot of the times as competition.
Yeah.
Because there was this whole idea in this community that there's only space for one of us at the table, right?
Yeah. And it's so,
yeah.
And
I think
it's so unnecessary because I do think when we lift each other up, we all benefit. And it's just now becoming a really commonplace conversation of, if you win, I win too. And, I'm thrilled for that dialogue, but it doesn't exist everywhere. And there's I think there's an evolution of men that are starting to get more comfortable with that. And I'm grateful for that too. So now you leave military, you go into Thunderbirds. Talk me through that story. So how did that happen?
Yes. So the Thunderbirds I was still active duty. Bless you. So I was still active duty Air Force with the Thunderbirds. That was just like the assignment I got sent to. So kind of how it works is I went through the training pipeline, eventually get F-16s, go to another school to learn to fly those. Then I go to my first operational squadron for 3 years in Japan. From there, I go to another operational squadron for 3 years in Texas. At the end of that assignment, I, still had 2 to 3 years left in my contract with the Air Force because they require a 10-year commitment
Mm.
after you graduate pilot training because they've just spent
They invested a
two,
ton of money in you. Yeah.
two
Yeah.
years plus training you, and again, a ton of money, like you said, because it is not or it's not cheap to fly aircraft, put
Mm-mm.
people up for those training flights. So they got to get their monies back. Their money back, not monies back. Over here talking like a gangster. Uh, so I am supposed to go to New Mexico to train new F-16 pilots. Like that's my assignment that they've already placed me in. But I'm approaching that and I see an email that the Thunderbirds are hiring. And the Thunderbirds was always something that was intriguing to me. Like I thought
Mhm.
the flying looked really challenging but really cool, and the mission looked really rewarding, kind of like the inspirational mission. But I never really told anyone about it. And even my boss, who I had such a great commander at that squadron, and he like spent a lot of time helping develop me, and he was really a mentor. And I never even told him it was something I wanted to do. And then I saw that email, I open it, I look at the requirements, and I meet all of them. And I was like, wait a minute. Not only am I qualified on paper to check all these boxes, but for the first time, I feel like I actually have the courage to apply and see what happens. And up to that point, there was no way I would have. And so I go to him that day, and this wasn't the first email. This was like the last email. Like,
Oh,
hey, heads up, the application window's closing next week. Last chance to get your packages in. I probably just deleted the other ones and not even opened them. I went to him and I was like, "Hey, sir, so I saw this email," and he was like, "Do you want to apply to the Thunderbirds?" And I was like, "I think so." And I still was like kind of timid, right?
yeah.
I wasn't like, "Yes, I do." I was like, I think I do." And he was just, like I said, a great mentor. And that moment could have gone either way. He could have either said, Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, where I was planning on going, like, they're counting on you showing up
Right.
in 3 months. They need you there. You've probably missed the boat on this one. Maybe you can apply next year and see what
Mhm.
happens. But he was seriously a commander that just wanted the best for all his people.
Love that.
And so he was like, "You would be amazing for that job. What can I do to help you get this application in
Oh,
time?"
I love that.
So we jumped through hoops because it was like 5 business days later that it was due, and the application's like 40 something pages. You have to get records pulled and have letters of recommendation and all the things. So he helped me make that happen. And I went into the interview process, ended up getting hired, and then got 3 years as one of the solo pilots with the Thunderbirds.
Oh, what a story. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with the Thunderbirds, can you explain what you did? Because I've seen it and it's very cool, but please tell the audience.
Yeah, so I feel like there's the people that like really know what the Thunderbirds are and have seen them at an air show and are like fans, and then there's
Yeah,
people that have like never stepped foot at an air show and just don't live in that world. I mean, that was me growing up. I just had no
sure.
idea. So in the US, there's two jet demo teams in the military. There's the Navy Blue Angels, so
Mhm.
some people might be familiar with them and not the Thunderbirds. And then the Air Force version is the Thunderbirds.
Visionary leaders, are you ready to elevate your leadership style and create an exceptional workplace that stands out from the crowd? I'm here to introduce you to a game-changing resource that will transform the way you lead and shape your company culture. It's time to embrace the power of top-down culture. This practical guide empowers your leadership for lasting success, helping you create a workplace where everyone thrives. Get top-down culture today, and let's reshape the future of leadership together.
And so we do pretty much the same thing. Two different types of aircraft. We fly the F-16. There's 130 people on the team, but what the public really sees are the 6 aircraft flying precise formation, doing what appears to the public to be like jaw-dropping, death-defying
Right.
stunts. Single aircraft maneuvers, max performing as far as like the G forces the jet can pull, how fast it can fly, how fast it can climb, flying upside down. It's really just showing the precision of the US military to the public because we think it's important that people see like where their taxpayer dollars are going, like
Yeah.
what we can do with that and the level of precision and performance that we have and the discipline
Mhm.
and all of that. And then another part of that is recruiting. The jet demo teams are like the biggest recruiting tools for the
Right.
military. maybe Top Gun is up there now as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's been a great one, at least for the Navy. But yeah, it's an air show, but it's an extreme version of it, right? It's
Mhm.
loud, the jets are close. It's even after I spent 3 years doing that, when I went back to an air show the following year as a spectator, I still had the same like
Yeah.
emotional feeling, like that I was just like, are they gonna hit each other? Oh my gosh, look at that. And I was like,
Well, it's
I know
anybody
how
that
it works.
sees it. I mean, even a flyover at a ball game is exciting.
Yep.
So, imagine that, that's all you're seeing for a given amount of time, and you feel those engines, you hear it. It's so visceral, and
It
it
is.
really connects. But I get why it's such a good recruiting tool too, because just like you had that feeling of like, wait, I want to do that. I
Yeah.
think that's the same reaction they get from a lot of people. So that's amazing. So the Thunderbirds, you put on these shows and you finish a show, and then what? What happens after that?
Yeah, so it is quite the schedule that you run. Air show season is basically March to November, and you're on the road every single week from Thursday to Monday,
Mm.
flying two shows, flying a practice on Friday at the location, and then two shows Saturday, Sunday, sometimes occasionally a 3-day show. But you go out there, you do like this precise ground show as far as how you march out to the jet. All the maintainers get to kind of show off their precision, get in, you take off, and then it's off to the races from there. And, like 40 minutes later, you land, come and shut down. And then eventually you make your way to a room where you debrief and you like really analyze the flight, look at what you can do better, mistakes that were made, why they were made, all focused on improving. But in between there, you go to the autograph line, and so people will line up along the fence in a designated area, and you go meet and greet with fans for like 20, 30 minutes.
Sure.
And I had some of the most amazing interactions
Yeah.
during that time, especially with girls and women. Being the only female pilot at that time, sometimes I would be just furiously signing autographs and like you're just heads down, right? You're signing, you're talking to the person that's right there. And then I would look up and I would look around, and some of my peers, like my wingmen that flew in the formation with me, are kind of like meandering around because their
They
autograph
have
line is
nothing to
like
do.
finished.
Yeah.
It's finished, and I
Oh,
look up and there's like 100 people in mine still, and I'm just like, like keep signing. And so it was a unique position to be in
yeah.
because I didn't do anything special to make that happen. It was just the fact that all of those people, all those girls especially, were seeing someone that looked like them, like you mentioned earlier. The
Yeah.
power of that is real, and for them to come up and have the chance to interact
Hmm.
was just really cool. And that was one of the things that kept me motivated, even when the schedule was long, the months were long, and I mean, we would get tired.
Yeah.
The flying is hard on your body. You're pulling 9 times the force of gravity you're experiencing at different points. But I would think about that kid in line who this is the only time they're going to have this interaction.
Yeah.
And they're like about to meet a real life superhero from their perspective,
Yeah.
right? And so I need to be on. It's like I've compared it to being like a Disney character at Disney World.
Yeah.
Like if Cinderella is not feeling well that day, doesn't matter. She has to show
Mhm.
up and like be a princess
That's right.
because that kid has this like inspirational moment they're about to experience.
Well, and
And
I
so
have to imagine those moments are, no pun intended, like jet fuel for you, because you see that connection, you see how inspired they are, and it's got to just make your heart swell, knowing that something you do really well made such a difference to them.
it did. It became the motivator, and it also became my favorite part of the job. Like the
Okay.
flying is really exciting at first, but eventually you get pretty comfortable doing it,
Sure.
and it's still a job. And
Yeah.
you're doing it again and the same thing over and over. But those some of those interactions were just so unique, and sometimes they would really stand out, and I'd still remember them years later. And that's kind of the thing that inspired me to make a pivot at the end of my time with the Thunderbirds and go do what I'm doing now. Was I wanted to keep doing that for people.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So you made the pivot, and now it's speaking, and talk a little bit about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew my time on the Thunderbirds was coming to the end. It's actually only 2 years normally. I got a bonus year because of COVID, so they asked all of us to stay for three. So 3 years is actually kind of a long time to do that schedule,
Yeah.
240 days a year on the road. And like I said, you
Right.
always have to be on.
Yeah.
And it can be just energy draining
Yeah.
at moments. So I was ready to leave anyway. And I had met my husband and now had a stepson. We met when I first moved to Las Vegas for my Thunderbird assignment.
Mhm.
So my priorities had shifted some.
Sure.
And I knew it was time for me to leave active duty. My body was also beat up from pulling 9 times the force of gravity on a regular basis, pretty hard on your back. And so I was like, okay, I know I'm going to leave. The natural transition for most pilots leaving the military is to go fly for the airlines. So most of my peers do. The airlines are hiring like crazy. It's
My
a
best
great
friend husband did
career.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Same.
great option. Like lots of growth potential there, especially right now. But it didn't get me excited. I was like, I feel like I'm walking away from a huge opportunity if I go do that. I'll be, kind of a face in the crowd taking people from point A to point B, which we need that. We need skilled pilots to do that. But I've just kind of built this whole audience of supportive people while I was on the Thunderbirds with really no intention of building a business off of it. But as that happened, I would have people asking me all the time, are you writing a book? Do you do speaking? Do you do school visits? Do you do all these things? And I had to basically say no to everything because the Thunderbird schedule was all consuming. Yeah. And there's a conflict of interest there. As my time came to an end, I started to get requests to speak that were like for the following year. So they were far enough out that I would be off of active duty. And I was like, oh, I can actually say yes to these.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the thing that had me exploring the speaking world, looking at the demand, thinking about what I would want to talk about even.
Yeah.
And the more I explored that, I knew I could probably get speaking events just based on my bio, right? And Thunderbird Pilot. But I didn't want to get up on the stage and be like, yes, cool jets. Like, heck yeah. Like that never felt authentic to me. And so I was like, what were the pinch points in my career? What did I struggle with? And like, which of these things are there likely a lot of other people that struggle with that I could help? People that are 5 years, 10 years behind me in that progression of growth. And I realized it was self-doubt. It was imposter syndrome. It was like just hamstringing yourself by passing up opportunities because it felt more comfortable to let them pass by rather than put yourself out there. So my first speaking event, I just sat down and wrote this 45-minute keynote in like one sitting. It was just like stream of consciousness, right? Like I experienced this, and here's this high stakes story, and this is how it hurt my confidence and all these things. And then of course I edited it and refined it and then memorized it and went and gave it for the first time. I was so nervous. And it was at a high school, right? So this isn't even like a big corporate audience.
Yeah, but it's still an audience. It's hard.
For sure. It was like 400 teenagers, and they loved it. And they were like, it's so relatable. Like we feel that way. We get it. And so I kind of just started to refine that speech more and more. Quickly got my first corporate client right after that in the financial services sector. And it was for like their leaders of their wealth management branch. And I was like, okay, this audience is more intimidating. Like everyone's very put together. I'm like,
but meanwhile, they're looking at you like she used to pull 9Gs. Like she's cool. So, I mean, it went both ways.
I had to give myself a pep talk a lot and think that like they hired me for a reason. Like they're excited to hear based on my background, and I don't have to be perfect on stage. I just have to be like, I just have to connect with them. I just have to tell them a story. So that was the beginning. Since then, I've done probably about 40 events last year. Had the opportunity to speak at a lot of great companies. I've done events in Canada, in Brazil, audiences of 3,000 people. And it's just, I've been busy.
It's great.
Like next week I give 3 events, or I do 3 events in 3 days. And so it really just took off, no pun intended. And I love doing it. And I think why I love doing it is because the story I'm telling while I'm up there and the things I'm talking about, they changed my life so much. And I feel so passionate about them. And the audience can feel that. They can feel that it's authentic. They can feel that it's relatable to them. And then you surround that with this like impressive background and these cool visuals of cockpit footage and jet photos and stuff. And they're like, wait, someone that did this thing that seems superhuman to a lot of people had all the same doubts and struggles and everything that I do, and they still pushed
from a small town and had no familiarity with it inside of a cockpit. And
so it opens everyone's eyes in the audience to like all the things that they can go do that they thought they might not be capable of. And it's so cool to do that for people.
I love that. And I think, anybody that I was just being interviewed earlier today, and they said, you know, did you ever think you'd be going down this path? And I said, absolutely not. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I certainly never thought I could create a website. I never thought I'd write a book. I never thought I'd host a podcast. I never thought I'd build my own company or speak to audiences. I wanted to do some of those things, but they weren't on my radar. And I'm not a spring chicken. And I've done this in the last 2 years. And, you know, you just kind of have these moments where when you're presented with this opportunity, you know, which path are you going to choose? And you had a bunch of those opportunities, which has served you well. So it's really cool to look at. So talk a little bit about your books that you wrote.
Yeah, so one of them is up here, Upside Down Dreams. It's the same name as my company. This was the first one, and so they're kids' picture books. I actually wrote the manual. Well, I had the moment of inspiration that made me decide to want to write that book during my first season with the Thunderbirds, all the way back in 2019. Visited the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in DC, went to the bookstore, and it's just an incredible place. But as I looked at the kids' books, there weren't very many with female pilots that I think were relatable to young girls. There was some historical stuff about, you know, like Amelia Earhart, but I was like, I want to write something where the little girl sees herself in the protagonist.
Love that.
And so I was like, I'm going to write a book about a little girl that wants to be a fighter pilot. Again, deciding you want to do it and then actually making it happen, two very different things. So the pandemic rolled around, the air show schedule dialed back a little bit, and I had a little bit of free time to write the manuscript. Had a lot of friends that helped me edit it. Just had a lot of really amazing people that supported me and gave me advice. And I pitched it to all of these literary agents. And you lose perspective on, like, when you're at air shows, you're the headline act, and people, like, everyone knows who the Thunderbirds are there. People are very excited about it. You realize that the literary world is very different, and they have, like, most of them have no idea.
No.
So I'm pitching it to, like, the top literary agents for the children's genre. Like, I went online and found them. Like, none of them respond. And I'm like, okay, all right, this industry is, you know, we're feeling things out. Air shows start back up and it gets put on the back burner. Eventually, though, when I leave the Air Force or I leave active duty and I start speaking, I'm like, now I want to pursue getting this published again.
Yeah.
So I connected with someone on LinkedIn, and she actually, I mentioned this manuscript, and she's like, wait, I am a children's author, and let me connect you with my publisher. And they were like ready to do a deal the next week.
I love it.
And they're like a small women-owned business, but it's been amazing to work with them. They're called Endgame Press, because they don't have hundreds of authors.
Yeah.
So I can, like, when I'm corresponding, I'm like talking to the owner of the company.
I love that.
And we've gotten to do some events together. NASCAR actually did an event with my book last year. One of the drivers has a foundation, and he picked my book to be like the thing that they highlighted for the weekend. So the publisher and I got to go to the race, be like VIPs for the whole weekend. It was super cool. But that's the first one. But I signed a contract for 3 with them. So the second one, What's Your Call Sign, comes out next month. So it's already, pre-sales are open right now. Same characters, same little girl, Lily Padilli, and her grandfather, who used to be a fighter pilot. They're back for round 2, and then round 3 will be next year.
I love it. I love it. And where can people find the book? Books.
So Upside Down Dreams, the easiest place is Amazon, honestly. And the internet can be a harsh place, but if I ever need a boost, I go read the reviews from this book on Amazon, because no one is mean to a children's author. All the reviews are like amazing. People will post pictures of their kids with it. They'll talk about their 3-year-old memorizing it because he asked it to be read to him every night for like 3 weeks straight. And I'm just like, it's a passion project.
I love it.
And it is definitely checking the box of being a passion project, because it's just so cool.
And now you're an author. And when you become an author, no one can ever take that away from you. And that is a very special club to be a part of. So congratulations. So talk a little bit about one of those pivotal moments that you described, that you talk about on stage, that really kind of shaped who you are and the decisions you've made.
Yeah, there's several. So I had, when I first got to Japan, you know, I'm new in this community, I'm young, I'm not very good yet, because no one's good at first, because it's hard, it turns out. but I don't have the wisdom and the perspective to realize that.
Mm.
And I was kind of this high achiever that, got good grades and got this scholarship and then beat the odds and not only got a pilot slot, but got a fighter jet. And so I would always hear my parents telling everyone in my hometown how proud they were. And I was like the golden child, right?
Yeah,
Like
of course.
just does all these amazing things. And then I get to Japan and I start to struggle some because it takes just a lot of repetition and a lot of time to get good at being a fighter pilot. It's very complicated. There's a lot of complexity in the tactics and it's very technical. And I could not accept that. Like I could not accept like being a beginner and a beginner's mindset. And so I was afraid to ask questions because I really felt like I had to prove myself in such an extreme way that I couldn't even tell anyone that I didn't know things. But
Yeah.
of course I don't know things because I'm brand new.
Yeah, I talk to leaders about this all the time. No leader knows everything. Anytime you get a new job, no matter how qualified you are, you still don't know everything. And that's okay. It's
Yes.
okay to be a work in progress. It's okay to learn. So continue.
And so I get there and as I start to struggle in the aircraft a little bit with just some tough flights, my identity is like shaken.
Hmm.
I'm like, if I'm not this person that's just good at everything, who am I? Like I start to go down this path of just self-doubt that I think is normal to some degree in that environment and being new, but it went beyond that and it turned into just like this paralyzing imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
Like feeling like every other pilot just knew so much more than I did and was just naturally so much better at this and could learn it so much faster. And also feeling like I needed to prove myself. I didn't feel like I could tell anyone that. So I kept these walls up of like, I'm fine. I've got this figured out. I don't need any help. And that like really, my mental health was terrible then because I felt so isolated.
Yeah.
I'm living in a foreign country as well, which is already kind of isolating. You don't speak the language. And then all of my friends, all of my community are fellow pilots, but they don't really know me,
Well, and you
right?
don't want them to know that you're struggling.
Right. So I can't show up authentically. I can't be myself. So I'm just playing dress up all the time. And you could do that for a while, but it is not sustainable. And 3 years of doing that, like I got to a point where I would have walked away from that career if I had the option of doing
Yeah.
that. Like I worked so hard to get there and I was like, I'm trapped and this is not for me
Yeah.
and I don't know how to get out of here. It was
What
miserable.
changed? What got you out of that?
A couple of things. So I ended up moving to a new base, which that helped, right? Because now I also went through a divorce while I was in Japan,
Mm,
which is traumatic in any setting,
of course.
but isolated on the other side of the world and all the other things going on that I've already talked about. It was just a lot. So I go to this next squadron and I'm naturally starting to get better because I've got repetition at this point. I'm not brand new. I'm 3 years in. Not great still, but better. And I get to this new squadron and the environment was a lot different there. They were a little bit older group of pilots, so they were really good at what they did because they had a lot of experience. And kind of that culture of like bravado and needing to prove yourself, it just wasn't really there.
Hmm.
They were just like, cool, like we are good at this, but we don't need to tell you how good we are.
Yeah.
And when people mess up, we're just going to look at it and look at how we can learn from it, which the other squadron still debriefed and had that fighter pilot mindset of let's look at our mistakes, let's learn from them. But kind of this undercurrent was happening of like competition and like you leave that room and then people would talk about so and so did really well or so and so like really messed that up and it would
Mm.
spread around the squadron and stuff. And it was just so much more welcoming in this other unit. And kind of that combination and then me realizing just how unhappy I was that moving from Japan all the way back to Texas and being in an entirely new environment with all new people, I was like, wow, I did not thrive at this first assignment.
Right.
And I was like, I missed out on a lot of opportunities because I was so scared to go after them
Yeah.
because I was so terrified of failing in front of everyone and like showing any weakness. And I kind of reached this, I guess, rock bottom point where I was like, screw it. I'm just going to start showing up as me. I'm going to tell them the things I like.
Yeah.
If I don't like their joke, I'm just not going to laugh at it and they can deal with that. And I'm going to also start to take more risks, not in the cockpit, but as far as going after opportunities. Like if they feel scary and uncomfortable, I get that feeling in the pit of my stomach, that apprehension, I'm going to recognize that and still go do the thing.
Yeah.
And so it was like a conscious decision, but it took time. Like it was probably the first year and a half of that assignment where I had to consciously recognize those opportunities, that physical feeling, and be like, you need to say yes to this thing. You need to go do it despite it feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But in just over a year, so much changed by making that little shift because I started saying yes to smaller things. Like these weren't monumental, like do or die type opportunities, little things. But over time, those got bigger and bigger. And, you know, like a year and a half in, I've deployed at that point. So I've gotten to actually prove to myself that I can do the mission in the actual environment. I've become an instructor pilot. So now I'm teaching other pilots and that responsibility is mine. And I'm like proving to myself that I am capable of doing that. And I went to Poland for a summer and ended up flying their F-16s and instructing their pilots, which they had never had a woman ever fly their F-16s. So I was a little apprehensive there, right? Like, I don't know if they're going to be welcoming or take instruction or anything. They were awesome. I proved to myself that I could not just survive in that environment, but I could thrive. And so demonstrating myself again and again that I was capable, that's what builds your confidence.
Yeah.
And so that's what got me to the point where I was like, I'm going to give this a shot and apply to be a Thunderbird and see if what happens.
I love it. I love it.
I would have never done that otherwise.
I love that you recognized the struggle and you learned the lesson, because so many people miss the lesson and they just keep repeating and they keep missing out until it bonks them on the head. It's like, then it's too late. So I just love that you learned that. I think that's brilliant. So what inspires you?
It is still seeing other people who have so much untapped potential and they're like on the precipice of taking the leap of faith to go after something that will fulfill that potential, and being able to be the one that gives them just that little push to help them find the courage to start taking the action. That inspires me all the time. And when people reach back out days or months later, even a year later at this point, from a keynote or a workshop, and they're like, hey, I saw you speak 6 months ago at this event. This is the thing, during my speech, I asked them to think of something that they've been wanting to do, like keeps popping up in their mind, but they haven't gone after it. And people will tell me things like write a book, start a nonprofit, change careers, go back to school, like all these different things. And then people actually go and do it because they're like, that was an epiphany moment for me where I realized I'm like just selling myself short by not pursuing this thing. And they'll contact me and be like, I went and did it.
I did it.
This is what happened. Thank you for that little push.
Oh my gosh.
So cool to be able to do that for people.
I love that. And this ties beautifully into my next question, which is, what would you like your legacy to be?
I don't want it to be that she flew for the Thunderbirds. Like, that's cool. And that's opened so many doors for me. But I was just flying an airplane. Like, as cool as that is, I was just flying an airplane. I want it to be she helped all of these people go achieve amazing things, and not really that they had these achievements, but that they got that feeling of contentment that comes with knowing you're fulfilling your potential.
I love that. Well, you are on your way, my friend. How can people find you?
I'm very findable. I publish a lot of content on LinkedIn. So it's just Michelle Mace, which is my call sign in quotes, Curran. Mace Curran on Instagram. There's some jet videos there that are pretty cool. And then a lot of kind of personal growth type content there. And then macecurran.com is my website for speaking, for workshops. The books get announced there. And then I just literally less than 2 days ago launched my first virtual course.
Nice.
Yeah, the Badass Masterclass. So that's cool. Yeah, because I get to take people. Thank you. I don't call myself a badass, but I was like, what do people tell me again and again? And people are always telling me that. And I'm like, wait, that's like a fun term. It also rhymes with masterclass.
It's good.
And who doesn't want to be a badass? I feel like that's a term that most people would love to be called.
I think more people need to find their inner badass. And
for sure, it's there. Yeah.
If everyone operated with that, like, it's in there. I just got to find her. you know, the world would be a different place. But you're so good to inspire that. And I am so excited for you. I think it's going to be an amazing cohort for anybody that attends. So check out the class, you guys. Check out her website. Michelle, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you for sharing all your stories.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. You were right. It is like sitting down with an old friend. Like you're just really fun to interview with, so easy and enjoyable. Thanks for having me.
Oh gosh, it was my pleasure. Guys, if you like this, if you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple. Thank you for listening. Take care of each other and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or consider leaving a 5-star review and a great rating at Spotify or Apple. Thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.